great majority of the area having to do with electronic message signing would be controlled by Architectural Review Board as well, just to get that out there. Let's see, everything else, I just make clear in this last section under 11-19 under H that specific sign requirements detailed in this section, that being the village commercial section 11-19, does supersede the requirements in the sign ordinance, which is Appendix D. We have our sign stuff scattered in 3 different places, so I know it's. All other sign criteria not specifically outlined in this section shall be governed by the regulations of the sign ordinance, which is Appendix D. So, again, I think village commercial, the way to look at it is that it places additional restrictions on signs when it's done in tandem with our sign ordinance. I mean, there's obviously greater restrictions in village commercial. I also included, secondly, some proposed changes to Appendix D. Not a lot of them. One of them was just noting that one change that could be made by ordinance, so I'm not going to cover that too much. But I put under prohibited signs, we have, and I don't know where this came from, it's probably a vestige from something we had in the past. We have some language that any sign extending more than 20 feet above ground level is prohibited, except that freestanding signs within shopping centers constructed pursuant to Section 3 of the ordinance may be constructed to a maximum height of 25 feet. Our freestanding signs are limited to 6 feet and 8 feet for the residential. We really don't need that in there. We just need to get rid of that. It's very misleading. I know when I read it, I said, well, now, wait a minute. Did I read the height requirements for freestanding signs wrong? So I went back and I looked at those, and then I talked to someone who'd been here a while, Mr. O'Connell here, and I said, am I imagining things, or is this thing really out of place? He said, oh, it's out of place. In fact, I think about a year or two ago, when we thought we might take on a lot more of signage, that was one of the things that was proposed for deletion. The idea behind this is basically to kind of get at the sign ordinance in pieces, digestible pieces, rather than trying to overhaul the whole thing at one time. I think that's kind of, it's a lot to take in. This is a lot to take in. As I said, color and design and developments lending themselves to multiple signing, village commercial development, a harmonious, I can't pronounce it, and unified signing program is recommended in the case of backlit signs, and I added or electronic message signs if we're going to allow those. That basically there needs to be a package, and it talks about the dark background and the bright lighting. So those are really the changes that we're looking at. I would suggest that we may want to address in text that y'all would be looking at in the future, the residential aspect of signage in VC as well. With that being said, I'm going to be quiet and we can discuss it.
Questions? Anybody have questions?
I'm just curious, why now? Why are we looking at it right now as trying to resolve?
Well, quite honestly, we've run into some issues with the brewery about signage. They inquired about an off-premise sign. We looked in our VC ordinance and we found out that we don't allow freestanding signs. So basically the provisions of Article D that would allow off-premise signage or a tenant sign they can't use it because they can't have a freestanding sign. Obviously, they're not going to have a wall or window sign because there's no building on the property. That's one issue. The other issue is that just me coming in new, looking at the Dr. Sevilla development, I mean, I've gone through the files to try to figure out exactly how we got there because it doesn't seem to be in accord with our current code. But I don't think anybody would argue that it looks out of place or is, is a bad looking office park. So, the idea was, well, what can we do to make that permissible in our ordinance without them jumping through BZA hoops and things that they really shouldn't be jumping through to get that?
I guess my question for the parcel that's on the corner of City Hall Avenue, that's one development, even though it's two separate buildings? Is that,
It
is
is
that?
one development, but I will tell you that they have talked to us about wanting to divide that property.
Yeah, because I had assumed, I guess, although architecturally it looks similar, with the two buildings and with the two monument signage, I just assumed that they were titled separately, for separate buildings.
I think it's all under unified ownership now, but I believe there is a desire to basically split the ownership. And, of course, we're talking to them about, how they'll accommodate, our VC setbacks in order for the parking and things of that nature.
So in terms of our vision for village commercial, and I guess I went back into, the overall mission of signage, right?
Yes.
Is to protect property values, number one.
Sure.
To protect and enhance the attractiveness of the city of Poquoson, number two. And to promote public safety and welfare.
Yes.
With the village commercial, and I might be off base on here, so correct me, I thought it was sort of more of a experiment to bring in a lot more mixed use, but also in a, organized manner, perhaps, than
Yes.
just sort of ad hoc
Yes.
commercial development. And
I-
I might be struggling here a little bit
No,
more
that's
with the planned unit development, and I know that's a whole different category.
Right.
It would seem to me that the signage sort of considered as sort of a comprehensive look within a PUD. Us going village commercial, do we have it within our power maybe to look at that, higher, well, I would say high is not the right word, but some sort of coordinated signage, even given that some parcels are going to be back down City Hall Avenue, like the brewery situation. They're obviously trying to get traffic off the main street, but it's within the whole village commercial.
That makes perfect sense, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think what gives us the leeway to do that in a zoning district like Village Commercial is that we do have that provision in Appendix D that talks about a unified sign submission program for projects that are lending themselves to multiple tenants, which Village Community certainly is.
Right.
I don't think there's any question that Village Community fits in there, or Village Commercial. Say it again. So, I think we do have that covered. We also have the Architectural Review Board that's going to come into play with any of these signs. They're going to be looking at this holistically as well. We're going to be presenting it holistically. It's not, I agree with you. You don't want to have one building get its signage and the next building goes in and they've got to fight their whole battle with the signage. That's not the idea. The idea is, well, tell us what your signage plan is. Let's take a look at it. Let's let the Architectural Review Board look at it, and of course, look at it through our ordinances and that sort of thing. So I think we've got that. I think in terms of the number of signs, I think what this could do, and I'll just say about the fountains. If you go by the fountains now, you've got a construction sign that says, Poquoson, Fountains of Poquoson. You've got some signs that are hanging in the window and hanging on the building. It's obviously going to be more than just that one building that's going to be built out. You're going to want a freestanding tenant sign in the front to tell you where everything is.
But was that not part of the application process for that development? Was signage not sort of a consideration?
I'm not sure that the
You know, as
Architectural
a-
Review Board has looked at their
Because
signage yet.
I assume they're temporary because it's still under construction.
Right.
Is there not anything that's
Well,
being
what I'm
presented
saying
as-
is that no freestanding sign right now is even allowed. So Dr. Sevilla got freestanding signs through a BZA variance, which, Probably should have done it a different way, but it doesn't really matter. It's there. It looks good. But my point is that right now, by the ordinance, you can't have a freestanding sign. We've got freestanding signs. So we need to, the idea is to try to, how to straighten that out.
I'm confused,
Sure.
so bear with me here.
Oh, no problem.
One freestanding sign is permitted per lot or parcel. Commercial districts and commercial uses, is that excluding these? Is that what I'm reading? Because it says one free sign is permitted per entrance.
You are in the Appendix D section.
Am I in the wrong place?
Well,
that
I
what
wouldn't
they're
say the
not
wrong
allowed?
place. That's certainly important. That's in Appendix D. Appendix D has provisions for freestanding signs. But if you go under 11-19 in Village Commercial, the first thing you read, the way it reads now, is freestanding monument signs shall not be allowed in this district. That's what it currently reads.
Those signs were intended to be there if they weren't a monument sign.
Well, if you go by this, the signs that were intended were wall, projection, or window signs. And that seems a little bit unrealistic. And going back to the safety issue that was brought up, I actually think a tenant sign that shows everybody where they're going on a lot helps the safety and the traffic movement. So to a certain extent, we're just trying to clean house a little bit on the specifics of village commercial, because as a general rule, specificity is going to overrule generality. So we have to look at village commercial as the number one document to look at for signage in that district. What's not covered by that, sure, we'll look at Appendix D. But I think that this is, I think this is what we're proposing to do here is certainly not unreasonable from the standpoint of enhancing the value and the functionality of village community development. That's the idea.
My understanding of what you're proposing is perhaps for a public hearing at an upcoming planning commission meeting. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We're not making decisions now.
No. But I'm certainly taking your input.
Well, it was a lot of reading.
Yeah, I don't think I'm prepared
It's a
to
lot.
take any recommendations.
Well, we
Okay.
can't recommend
Yeah,
the work session
okay.
anyhow, but, I mean, it was a lot of reading. I read it
It
about
is.
3 times, and I think I was more confused every time I did. That's
Yeah.
me, that's not anything. But I understand what you're saying.
It's not the easiest material to go through.
I do
It's
think,
not.
No, it's not.
without stepping too far in front though, but I do think if we're going to talk about illuminated signs at the regular meeting today,
Mhm.
and that has to go back to city council, and we have to see what city council does. I do not know that we're going to be able to take all of this at our next planning commission meeting. I don't know when city council might take it up. I have no idea.
Well, the schedule was to try to get this in front of city council by March. Here's an alternative. I'm not particularly wed to the electronic message signage. If we have some concerns about electronic message signage, let's just take that out for right now.
Well, I will tell you honestly, I think mine will back me up. Electronic message signs came before the planning commission some years ago, and we turned it down. So we didn't turn it down. We recommended against it
Sure.
fairly strongly, and I would really need to hear why we want to consider it now.
Well,
But didn't you say it wouldn't be running, wouldn't be fading, is it just going
That's
to be a
correct. If you look-
constant lit sign? It's just
it's going to be a
electronic?
constantly, well, it's going to change at no quicker than an 8-second interval. So in other words, you'll have coming up, hours, $2.99, whatever. And then that'll not going to fade, it's not going to dissolve, it's not going to scroll. That'll disappear, other messages will come on, visit Joe's tire. That's really the idea.
On the main sign? Is this what we're talking about? The
It
main
would be-
sign or
it
any
would-
sign?
It would be a freestanding sign by definition.
But I'm saying like the tenants, would they be allowed to
No,
have that type of signage?
no, it would be one per development.
I'm just thinking, and I'm just thinking out loud, that when I go into, for instance, the office park, over off of Diligence, there are a couple of developments in there that have numerous buildings within that one development. And without a freestanding sign placed at various
Right.
spots, you would never find where
Right.
you're going.
You're
Right.
lost
So,
anyway in
well,
that.
if you
Right.
say one sign at the entrance, I mean, depending on the complexity of the project, I don't think one sign can always be sufficient to guide the public to it. And I know when I'm driving up to, if I am looking to go somewhere specifically, I am looking for that sign as I drive before I get there.
Mhm.
And if only one sign is allowed and it's 6 feet tall, I'm thinking, well, is that really going to be beneficial to the public? And I think this 25-foot sign, which I assume is Farm Fresh's powering sign. So if you had another development come in here, I don't know, maybe not a Farm Fresh, but some other type of development, maybe they would need that tall sign, because I know when I'm driving down the interstate, I'm looking at those signs. Is that the exit I want? Or if I'm going to a property, is that where I want to be? Because if you get up on top of it,
Right.
before you see it and can read it, it can be harmful to somebody that's driving behind you, if I'm slamming on my brakes.
I don't know how we've allowed signs that are taller than 6 feet in the past. My guess is that maybe we've looked at it from the standpoint of I guess we could look at it as a variance. That's one possible way you could look at it. The other possible way is possibly even with that conditional use permit provision we have, which basically says if a use is not articulated or expressly forbidden, then you can apply for a conditional use. It may be one of those two. I'm just not sure. I can certainly find out. But Appendix D does talk about more than one freestanding sign. It actually talks about one per entrance.
Yeah.
And we could certainly go with that.
And I think each entrance should have a freestanding sign.
Well, okay,
Personally.
and that's more of a case where maybe we ought to fade, well, we don't want to fade all the way to Appendix D because we may not, it sounds like we may not want to look at electronic message signs in VC, which I think is perfectly fair. I mean, I think just allowing some, internally lit signs should be sufficient. I'm not particularly wedded to the electronic message signs, but I did put them in there because I thought it was something we needed to discuss. But yeah, I hear you.
The Appendix D mentions, to Libby's point, that immediate recognition by a driver to prevent a hazard is one of the goals, I guess, of signage. And this is just an FYI, I have real concerns with the middle school electronic sign.
Right.
There is so much text usually, and it is moving at times, that it's almost totally unreadable coming down there.
Pretty far
And-
from the right-of-way, too.
Excuse me?
It's pretty far from the right-of-way.
It is, yeah, and so there's a lot of discretion that goes into signage. It's a craft and a skill to do it well and not be as verbose and just be,
Sure.
accurate in terms of, how you want to direct the public. But, yeah, I guess the signage, you want it at a certain size. So if you've got multiple tenants, that's a challenge for the developer. How do you get everyone in a way that's safe to a driver?
It is, and that might be one reason why you have two freestanding signs on Dr. Silver property, because you've got two buildings.
Yeah.
And you could say one freestanding sign per building, I guess. But, in a development like the Fountains, where you're going to have 5 or 6 buildings, that just seems to be a lot going on there. I think of when I go to my dermatologist, it's in a park in Williamsburg, when you go in there, or even Oyster Point, and, every building is, you've got a letter on a building, or you got a number on the building. You have a general sign or directional signs that kind of point you where to go, but they certainly don't list every tenant that's in there. But yeah, the directional signage is helpful, and I don't know that, on-premise signs that are directional, I'm not really sure that we would necessarily have a problem with that, but I don't know. It does beg the question about freestanding signs. Right now, none are allowed. The idea was to improve the situation.
Something,
Um,
right.
We may run into other issues down the line. I'm certainly not going to preclude that
Is it
possibility.
premature? I'm looking at the village commercial, I guess designation on the zoning. Do we
Yes.
know, is it too early to know what the road pattern will be? egress. I know we've extended Fountains Lane, and we're certainly going to be extending City Hall avenues. Would it behoove staff, or again, is it subject to what development proposals in the
Well, I mean, I think it's going to rely a little bit on what the development proposals will be in the future. I will tell you that where City Hall, where you have the roundabout, and where it's going to go, if you're looking at the map to the right, to the Straight Shot Brewing property, the eventual plan is for there to be a street in there to connect Alphas, to create a thoroughfare. But, that may not be built for many, many years.
So it's too early to say.
Yeah, so, if we're that murky about that, then I would say we're probably murky about future road patterns, elsewhere in village.
If we look at where the Fountains Lane is now, there's
Mm-hmm.
like 3 very close together entrances into the Food Line,
Right.
Fountains, and then bingo right into Langley Federal.
Right, and there'll be
So,
another one for townhouse
yeah.
development probably in the future, so.
So our developers, every support that we can, customers to their properties.
Right.
Restaurant, I know there's been ability.
Right, right. Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
I've just drive
Exactly.
by. I mean,
Yeah.
for a drive, knowing that it's there, so.
Specific issue with the brewery, that all of this sort of came about.
Well, specific to the brewery is that they have, they have limited visibility on City Hall Avenue. Initially, they asked about an off-premise sign to go near the front. That would essentially have to be on EDA zone property up towards the front of Victory Boulevard.
They'd have to approve that, right? EDA would have to approve.
Yeah, but they can't do it because you can't have a freestanding sign in DC. You can't have one now. We're trying to open it up to allow you to have at least one. Maybe we need more.
But that would benefit them? Is that what you're saying? It would benefit the
Absolutely, it would
brewery?
benefit them. And it would also make the Silva Office Park, once they cut it up, would actually make it conforming, but, But it's treated as conforming anyway, because they got a variance from the BZA.
EDA would have to
but
approve of allowing them to put that sign on property, correct?
The EDA would have to allow Mr. Straight to put.
And
yes.
short of that, he would not have any ability to put a sign in the front, is that correct? Because of where his location is?
Well, that's correct. I mean, what he's probably going to have in the back would be something like a wall sign, once you get back there, but he feels very strongly, and he's probably right, that he needs to have a sign on Victory Boulevard directing people in on City Hall. He has the ability to do that because these properties owned by EDA are extremely long, and so that they are abutting properties. To have off-street signage, it has to be on an abutting property. In addition, the EDA could choose to do a boundary line adjustment to allow them to get closer to City Hall Avenue. That's up to the EDA, and I don't know. I feel like they, absent any other, problems, they would probably do it, but, they'll have to take a look at it and see.
I guess we ought to probably maybe and
Yeah, I
get going here a
Sure.
little bit.
Sure.
And we certainly can ask more questions during, discussion, but
absolutely.
not to limit his time.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very good. Very good. Thank you. We ride by them so often. You just,
Don't think-
they're like they're there, and you don't think about what they actually look like.
Right.
Okay, so now that everyone's blood is flowing, begin presentation of the next couple of sections of the comprehensive plan, chapters 5.2 and 5.3 of the environmental management chapter, the shoreline and groundwater sub-elements. So again, here are the old draft goals. They have not changed since our last meeting in December. And I'll jump right in with the changes to the shoreline sub-element. Begins with a rewritten introduction paragraph, kind of better introducing the sub-element. Following that is a lot of rearranged language of the first two sections of the shoreline chapter. Separate sections have been created for shoreline inventory and for shoreline erosion. Previously, they were all thrown in together. We've moved paragraphs between these and the stabilization section to make the chapter flow a lot better and to provide information a lot clearer. And we've updated references to VIMS reports for Poquoson. The most recent reports were conducted in 2010 and 2013 respectively, and so we've updated those dates and the titles of those reports. We've also revised shoreline stabilization strategies included in the chapter with assistance from the city engineer. We've updated the dates on the subaquatic vegetation section. Following that, we've removed Table 5-3 as it was somewhat excessive information that was not particularly relevant to the comp plan. We've updated the inventory of shoreline access points, which includes docks and ramps, boat ramps, as per the latest VIMS report. Well, the demand for shoreline access section has been left blank. In the current copy of the comp plan, this is a discussion of the 2004 and 2006 public surveys, which did include several questions on shoreline access, boat ramps, docks, and things of that nature. And one of the questions I'll pose to you tonight is, was there any significant demand for more shoreline access noted during the comp plan survey? For those of you who may have had work in tallying the open-ended questions. I know I don't think we included any specific questions asking about shoreline access, but if a number of write-in responses were included, we could try and make an effort to include those in this section. Finally, we've significantly shortened the section on shoreline redevelopment. This section currently is a very long discussion of all of our shoreline sites and the potential for redevelopment, as well as I think it's the fourth time that a waterfront master plan has been mentioned in the comp plan. These sections were all basically previously covered in the economics chapter in chapter 4, so we've removed discussion of all of these sections. We've removed discussion of intensely developed areas, as we don't think we will be having any of those anytime soon, and we've removed the section on the waterfront redevelopment master plan. Finally, for the goals, objectives, and strategies, a running theme is we've consolidated our goals into a single paragraph, and we've done some minor reorganization of the objectives and strategies. In particular, we've moved shoreline management plan, the creation of a shoreline management plan, to objectives, and we've removed development of administrative policy and no wake zone objectives because they have already been accomplished. Moving on to Chapter 5-3, which is groundwater. Starting with, we've removed excess information regarding sources of potable water. There's a very long section on local geology, which we don't think is particularly relevant to the comp plan. We've removed excessive geological information regarding groundwater framework and groundwater recharge areas. We've removed topographic analysis of localized groundwater recharge and discharge subsection. And we've consolidated the facts of that in the previous section on groundwater recharge areas. We've removed some excessive explanatory information in the local groundwater protection subsection. We've removed Table 5-6, which was outdated, and we've also removed outdated information regarding leaking storage tanks. We've updated the number of private septic systems as per the most current data, and we've added language in the water supply demand section to emphasize that future private wells are not likely. Finally, again, goals, objectives, and strategies. We've consolidated the goals into one paragraph, and we've done a minor reorganization of objectives and strategies and removed several of the redundant strategies that were included in the current comp plan. I'll be happy to take any questions that you may have.
And how did the number of septic tanks did it compare with? Were there any projections of what they were going to be? I was curious whether they exceeded or under the projection. We have more than we thought we would, or do we have less?
We have less. I think
Good.
the current number is in the 60s, and I think the number we included was somewhere around 40 some septic tanks. So the number is going down, but I think most of those are considered to be non-functional. Again, basically everyone is served by city water and sewer, so.
I noticed yesterday, but I didn't go back and look at all the figures I have. I don't think I have enough. You asked the question about whether the survey talked about access to water.
Right.
I know it popped up in a number of comments. I'm not sure they were specifically to that, because we had some people talk about they wanted to be able to get their boats in. We had people who talk about wanting to get to a beach, want to be able to utilize the water. I really have to go back and look. It's a good question. We didn't specifically ask that question, so I'm afraid we're probably going to be stuck with an interpolation no matter what we do. But it did pop up a fair amount.
It did. And I don't remember the quantity, how often it did pop up. I do remember it, but again, as far as the whole bank of answers, I don't know if it was significant or not.
But I think in context, though, the survey questions were developed around the time where council was considering making the beach at Messick Point. So I think the people who are very much in favor of that happening thought that that was already an action item that was going to be addressed. Now, subsequent to that, I guess we're at the situation. So the questions that were addressed in the survey had more to do with flooding. I've actually got a copy of the survey here. Flooding, conservation, and the environment, which are really addressed during this chapter that you're looking at. So.
The previous section was, I guess, the current comp plan is significantly more focused on waterfront redevelopment, and that's kind of been scaled back since then. So a lot of that information has just been removed.
One of the
from
things
current
I was
draft.
really interested to see, Dannon, was the section that dealt with private docks. Had in the prior comp plan, it reported 448 private docks and boathouses. Your revision are indicating 637 private docks. That's quite a significant increase, I guess, in a 12-year period. If it's so, I'm seeing this as maybe an impact that perhaps we should be looking at. I know we addressed the boathouse revision, I guess, in a meeting several times before. The compilation of encouraging and allowing individual docks versus maybe encouraging more community docks with a development for property owners and then developing a dock might be something that we might want to emphasize a little bit more.
Right. Does it give a number of public docks? Do you remember the current number of public docks?
Okay, we got, this is the current comp plan before your revision. The report indicates in 2001, there are 448 private docks located in the residential areas. And I think your revision, did my math. 637, I think, is what. If we add 30, we've got quoted 574 currently, plus 63 boathouses. A total of 637. That's a lot.
Right. No, I was concerned that the language changed a bit because the current VIMS report did not distinguish between public and private docks. And I was thinking that we might have joined that number together. I didn't look at the previous report from the current comp plan where that number came from, but
I don't think we want to get into limiting abilities and rights to build a dock. A lot of people buy on the water for that purpose, to be able to use the water and have a dock for a variety of different type boats. So I don't think that's within our purview to just tell somebody they cannot build a dock on their waterfront property. Now, you can limit maybe some areas through design and that type of thing, but to just say, well, if we had another 100 docks, I don't think that's for us to say. An individual property owner can't build a dock on their property because the city's trying to limit the number of private docks.
Yeah, no, that's not, I guess that's not the intent of, I guess the statement. It's more of the environmental impact that's occurring when you take the total in totality, and it's the total environmental impact. Lots of docks. So I for us, if we're to be the stewards of the comp plan and we're concerned about shoreline erosion and that type of thing, environmental standards, then we need to be what's causing,
I would agree with what Lee says. I would simply say that, I would rather point out that in that section, I gotta get my sections all mixed up, section 2, your strategy number 10 says to encourage community peers in new waterfront housing developments. I don't think there's much we can do about, as you said, existing ones. I mean, I don't live on the water, but if I lived on the water and I wanted to put a dock in the back of my house, I should be allowed to do that.
Absolutely.
This, we are certainly asking or suggesting that we try to encourage consolidation in new developments.
And I agree with that. There are some developments I'm thinking of in York County that do have community docks, and that's fine, but if I bought a property on the water tomorrow and I want to build a dock there, I don't want you to tell me you can't build a dock there.
I don't think
we have
that's
too
what
many
that says.
innocent-
This
Okay,
is
as long-
this is a development. I'm assuming a development is.
Well, I know, but I'm talking about the totality, like you say, the impact as more and more continue to be built, then I think it's our role maybe to determine the type of materials or the design to allow the water flow, and shading of the waters below and that type of thing. But to just say, well, I think that, not the right of the individual to do that, I would.
So along that line, another section that talks about natural shorelines as a way to mitigate erosion.
In some areas.
Right, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's all site-specific.
Depends on where, yeah.
Of course.
Right.
But talking about doing it as a community or with your neighboring or adjoining properties, so that, if you put in a living shoreline, it makes no sense just for you, to do it on an individual basis and go to that expense when, if you're looking at a living shoreline, to be more effective, it takes 4 or 5 properties going in together. So in the spirit of that, also I could see where city, or if there's a development going in to encourage docks for the same reason. People would still have access to the water. I mean, it's not that you're denying it, it's just that the impact that development may have in compromising the quality of our shorelines.
The city is not the only control governmental body
right.
over a dock.
No.
I mean, that's kind of what I'm seeing. Now, I don't know, I may be looking at it.
Still have that right
Oh, yeah, you do. You
to
certainly
do
do,
that
and
on
I
your
agree.
property that abuts the waterfront.
And
And
if
I
you
would
don't-
never propose to take that away
No,
from
and
anybody.
if you don't, we could encourage that people do a community-type dock. I mean, we certainly could encourage it, but it's difficult to enforce that or impact that on individuals. I don't
Mandate
think you
that.
can.
Mm-mm.
No, you can't. You can't. You can encourage it, but you can't.
I agree.
That's a good way to say it. Close that. All right. Have we're just about here to 7 o'clock. I think we.
I'll tell you what, that's a lot of work you put in
Yeah,
that
I
again.
know, it is. It's really great.
Cross-eyed by the time this is done.
Well, as I said, most of it is just trimming and curating the existing language and updating it.
Yeah.
So, did manage to get a good 5 pages of all that redevelopment fluff removed, so that's nice.
And that's good. That's really good.
I
Very
think you've
good.
also, belabor a point, but I think you've also gotten, so far, we have one big section to go. We've taken care of a lot of the ambiguity. The issue, if you remember from the mayor and the city council.
Right. Well, again, I don't want to be the outlier here, as I'm tending to become, but I will go ahead and say, with us living in the environment that we do, I think the city of Poquoson has an obligation to do everything that they can do to contribute to the water quality of the Chesapeake Bay. Our legacy of a watermen's community, I think, we've all seen the demise of our watermen's industry through the compromise of our environment. I think we're at a point where a collective assertion to try and improve water quality has really come about through jurisdictions working together collaboratively. And I would really like to see Poquoson become one of the leaders because of our proximity to the Bay, certainly our legacy, but also because of our very marginal lands. I mean, we have a lot to lose if we don't do it right. And we've all seen storms coming here. All have lived through, most of us lived through Isabel, some of us, the others even history. And so I think we're a very sensitive area. And so I see these two chapters as a really, really important one that we should have carefully. I would like to question the Langley Air Force Base Superfund, the super site. Do we know what the status of that super site cleanup is? And if so, it was deleted, I guess, from the new, well, maybe not. I think you did. It was 5. Yeah, I not see Langley. Oh, yeah, it is still in there. Okay. Do we know what the status of Langley's cleanup is, other than it was in the prior comp plan?
I do not, and part of the reason why that wasn't emphasized further is because there really isn't a lot of communication between us and Langley and the federal government on the status of anything related to Plumtree Island. Fish and Wildlife does the things that they do, and they tell us about it. We haven't
Right.
really been solicited, at least not during my tenure, for anything
It's not
related
going
to
to show up in the plan, but Langley's been going on forever.
Well,
I mean, I
that's
retired out of Langley in 1989. I left the flight line in 1981.
right.
And we had fuel in the dirt then, and we got fuel in the dirt now.
Well, and that's my question. I mean,
They've been working it.
they've been under the gun to do it. I would assume that along far enough to, have some improvement. That goes right into our back river. I mean, that's where our watermen come right in from, and that's Messick Point right there. So I would be very curious to know if we could have more information about the status of that cleanup, because that is certainly something that's impacting our community.
I think it would be a good idea if you could see what you could do. I don't know how much you will be able to get, but I mean, it certainly wouldn't hurt to try to
Okay.
do that.
Let's certainly look into it.
Yeah,
See what we can
it
find.
wouldn't hurt to try. I mean, then certainly say you
There
did.
is a parcel, I believe, adjacent to Langley that has had and I have a little bit of information on that I could provide maybe at another meeting.
Because I know the Chesapeake Bay Foundation has an oyster that they were trying to propagate in the back river to try and improve the water quality, and I'm not sure if there was an I mean, I don't know, but that might be something else to see what the water quality might be. pesticides. Right, so we live on a waterfront community, and pesticides, we live in a watershed. We know all water gets filtered down to groundwater. Is this something that we could identify as a community that we could do something about to reduce the use of pesticides in our community?
Again,
No.
I'm a very strong proponent of individual property owner rights.
I know-
And
I
I
know
don't
that,
think
Libby.
that you can mandate that. I think we can educate people and we can encourage
Yes.
and we can put on, talks and conferences and whatever you want to do, but to mandate that you can't use pesticide on your property, I don't think that's our right to do. I just don't.
It's a real fine line between, ideally, if we could totally control, we can't.
No, this
We
is a
can't.
guiding document, and that's my point.
It's right, that's
I mean,
right.
as a planning commission, through this comprehensive plan, are discussing the city based on feedback that we've received from the population. I'm not sitting here as an individual pounding my fist. I'm just
No.
saying that these are considerations, given that we're a waterfront property. Living shorelines, paving restrictions was a big response from our citizens, and that's to do with and oil and all kinds of stuff going into our waterways. No development in flood zones. So
There's so many.
planting trees is huge. It's another area. So between pesticides and planting trees, I think we can be sending maybe a message or rather than just sort of a very general document. We have a few little standards that we would like to see through getting involved and seeing that quality will improve in our backyard. And look what Poquoson's done, which is really,
That's
could be
part of
really amazing.
evolution. I mean, it's sort of like, when I was growing up here, people threw candy wrappers out the window,
Oh, yeah, sure.
And so then the campaign got on, put your trash in a receptacle, and actually we got a law for littering and that sort of thing, which, brought that into check. But I think that, again, we can encourage it, we can have that as a campaign, but I would stop short of mandating, no pesticide, no paving, no this,
And
no
this
that. I just don't-
document's not the document to do that. See, we're getting away
This
here
is a general-
totally. This is
I'm
not the
not
document
advocating-
to do it.
I'm just saying awareness that we could emphasize. Yeah.
Programs that could be started, I'm in full agreement with that. But this document, we're kind of getting away, I think, from what this document does. There are a lot of regulations certainly by governmental agencies, which cover a lot of control over the environment already. This document is not meant to, it's not meant to be a law type thing
Right.
here.
It's a guiding document.
It's a guiding
Yeah,
document.
absolutely.
But it's not, it's also not supposed to be a finite, a ruling, so to speak. I don't think it can be a guide, certainly, but not too specific and set totally in stone, because this is a document that certainly we know has to change as time goes on and different circumstances come up. And they certainly do. I mean, times change.
My other question, Dannon, was the underground storage tanks. And the current comp plan, 24 registered underground storage tanks in Poquoson. Has that changed now?
I don't know, because that information is held by the Virginia Department of Health, and going through the process to contact them and try to get an up-to-date number was not within the scope of this draft.
Been able to drill that down.
Yeah, I
Okay.
couldn't obtain that information in time to get this copy of the comp plan to you.
Because it looks like we had a few spills. I mean, my question, if we do have existing, going to get compromises, it's going to get worse before
Right.
it gets better. And that's, I guess, is another area where we could be diligent to either, inspect or something to know where we have the issues.
I mean,
know that-
again, the Virginia Department of Health is basically the ones that are handling that. They don't tell us, we don't have any numbers past what's in that paper there, and they basically handle it all themselves. So it'd be a matter of tracking down that information so that we could actually know.
Yeah, because,
I
I mean,
know.
that could time bomb right in our cities.
Right, well, we can definitely try to get that
We have no
information in
control
there.
over.
All right, we've got about 7:00, well, almost 7:10, so I guess we probably better end this work session and late that we've got a meeting to open.
Chairwoman Trevor, I'm sorry to interrupt. Just in case the visitors here, we have designated a couple minutes at the end of the work sessions for public comment for that. I don't know if you,
I came hoping there was public comment for the 7 o'clock.
okay.
Okay,
yep.
Okay, you.
Sorry, thank you.
I will say that I have been listening, and I really appreciate the caliber of the conversation that I moved into town. And I'm an environmental scientist myself, and I'm happy with just well, we appreciate that. Thank you. All right, let's see.